I'm not sure, why would we want Hunter Hill Road to take over that through their development?
This gives them easier access to get out instead of coming this way.
Right now, they have to go down to Willow Glen and come out.
Those roads are so narrow up there, and that's another thing that we've learned through the years. We've made mistakes in some of these developments, like Hycroft roads are so narrow.
Right.
They should have never made that narrow. I mean, you have a hard time getting a salt truck through there.
So you're saying if our trucks go through here, if we don't take over Hunter's Hill, we're not allowed to exit here? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm not saying that
I'm just not sure why we wanna take on any more road than we have to.
Can I make a comment? And I understand where you're coming from. I understand you don't want the roads. Hycroft's 24-foot cartway, 33-foot right-of-way. We're proposing 28 and 50-foot right-of-ways. The reason why we're proposing that to be taken by the township, because, and I've seen this happen in other communities, the homeowners association has that street, and they maintain that street, and they block it off and say, we're not allowing those residents to come through our property, or come through on our streets because we maintain them. That's the reason why we're suggesting that that street be dedicated to the township, so that that can't happen. So it can be used for a quicker, safer access to Route 23.
So
That's
when I go
the
through
only
Brittany
reason.
Estates, I shouldn't be using that road, well, that's our road. It
No,
was
the
dedicated to-
main road is township
Okay,
road, I
so-
believe. But that's the whole reason, is because I can give you.
Chili's in there.
Yeah. Okay, so,
Do you have anything else, Scott?
I mean, my comments are basically related to what I was saying. The private street, or I'm sorry, the service street noted on that section, and then the allowance of the other uses other than single-family detached, that would allow that to reduce the number of parking spaces that they have to provide. I feel like it should stay with that single-family dwelling and the townhouses if that's what's proposed, and really strike the other ones for that amendment if that's, if that is something that did move forward. I don't see why that would be in there to allow for that, and then possibly see a parking issue, or enough room for plowing or anything else. So in my opinion, I think that would be something that I would recommend just being struck from that ordinance, just to.
And that's what,
Exclude.
62812?
So, it's the sections I have, it's 598D, 2 through 4, which is the second page.
so has anything else changed on this since it went to planning?
There were changes made. We gave, I believe that we sent Mr. Brown a copy in January with the track changes. The changes incorporated what portions we could of the comments that we got from the July 2021 County Planning Commission. So they were, we made edits where appropriate there. We didn't change anything else that wasn't specifically addressed by the Planning Commission.
Scott?
The other comments were 598L1E, that's the service street. I think that one, I just, if they ever wanted to put in a service street, it would fall back to the Saldo ordinance for streets, which would then be a 24-foot wide street for a service street. I think that's more appropriate if it went that direction.
L1A.
L1E.
Which is again, a provision we said we'd strike.
And then related to that 598, what I was saying about the other use, or the other dwelling units, 598 O1A, hold on, let me tell you what page it's on. Page 11. 598 O1A, and then it would be the triple I, and then the IV. Sure I'm not saying over it, but that would be related to the parking that would only require 2 parking spaces for those dwelling units, which I think is
basically coincides with the other one from earlier.
Yeah.
So what are you saying here? 598 parking standard, two seats, scratch that one. And then next to
I mean, again, I think this is, if the amendment is being considered, those I think are, from what I've seen, I don't think they would apply to this plan, and therefore why have them included in there? But-
Scott, could you repeat what provision that is again, the best you can?
598 O,
Yep.
1A, and then it's, whatever you wanna call it.
Three little I's.
2 little i's, 3 little i's, and then an I and a V.
Okay, so you want to strike the bottom of page 11 and the top two provisions on page 12?
Those are, yeah, and those represent the parking requirements for the uses that aren't being proposed. I should say the housing types.
Is that acceptable?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be acceptable.
I still think we should go with the plan.
I'll point on some of these strikings, I can understand Scott's approach, because it's not part of the proposal that Burke's is presently advancing. The risk, and it may be small risk, is that if the plan evolves during the land development plan such that now there is semi-detached or two-family, or any of those categories, and you haven't provided for the parking, then your ordinance is silent on that, it might then create another issue. So, in my view, it's better to be over-inclusive and provide for it just in case, as opposed to striking it and then not having it there on a day that you might need it or want it.
Just to make sure.
There's always a chance that somebody's plans change, even though there may not be the intent to do that right now. So the bottom line is, if you allow for a two-family home or for some of these other categories, it is conceivable that an applicant can come along and propose it, there wouldn't be a basis for you to deny it because it's permitted to the ordinance itself.
You wouldn't be opposed to the service street recommendation, though, if that's the.
You know, I mean, same thing, if something changes and Burke's or whomever their successor is decides to propose a service street and it's not identified here in this ordinance, then you have just an issue to address, so it is theoretically conceivable or possible, there's no harm in leaving it.
But by leaving it or reopening it up to be already approved.
Correct. If it's there, then yes, you would be obligated if they meet the requirements to permit it. If you don't want to see service streets anywhere within the proposal, then you can convert that and say service streets shall be prohibited. And then they can't propose it, and then it doesn't matter how wide service streets are.
I mean, trying to address that again, I think this is what happened when we lifted language out of the PRD and, you know, what was proposed for unit types. You know, we have two, whether it's, you know, per dwelling in the 2 little I, the 3 little I, the 4 little I. Again, we can either strike it, we could leave it in and, you know, address it as we go through the tentative plan process. If we're not proposing those units, then it's a non-issue. If we're proposing those units, you know, we need to work that out through that PRD process.
As far as section 5 had no. For that ordinance, that was my comment specifically.
Do you need to look at what you just talked about, or you?
In a general sense, I just told you what my sense is. If I can summarize and maybe focus you, everybody's clear on what Burke's Homes is requesting. This is a new board, you're certainly entitled to a new opinion different from the prior board. The request being made by Burke's is really several questions wrapped up in one. First is what I always call the threshold question, that's is the majority of the board open to the concept of residential as proposed by Burke's? And you can answer yes to that, Paul certainly has. But then the next question beyond that is, if your answer is yes, is this ordinance ready for a hearing and ultimate approval? That might be no. If the board wants to support residential, but still wants to consider what Scott has to say or tweak it in some fashion, my recommendation would be you do that before you advertise the public hearing. You can change the ordinance at the public hearing, but if the changes are significant, then it needs to be re-advertised. And we get into disputes over what's a substantive change versus what's a small minor change, but it opens up a dispute. And so really the second question is this particular ordinance in front of you tonight a yes? And then if the answer is no, then your consultants and everybody needs guidance on what other changes you want to see. And then thirdly, of course, is the question of timing. Are you ready to advertise the public hearing for March 7th? I would recommend you only do that, or March 8th. You only do that if you are comfortable with the ordinance as it's presently presented.
Well, I guess the biggest question here is, I guess we need to ask the board, who's in favor of development and who's in favor of commercial? I mean, I'm not hiding the fact that I would rather have residential.
Commercial.
I'd like to have a commercial on the road there and have a restaurant and get a drink.
I don't think, since we've had commercial come before the board and we've already had discussion as to what it can't be, the only thing that we've had that wasn't quote-unquote presented was the warehouse, which to me, the distribution center is the same type of thing, only technically a little bit different. I'll go with the way it looks now, which makes sense to me residential, since the commercial was already shot down. And we have commercial properties that we can't get anybody to fill.
Now, could we vote on this, striking what Scott asked to do?
If you want to do that, you can
Well,
do that.
first off, so we're not gonna consider, you just won't consider a planner at all? You won't
I'm not
spend
gonna
money
spend
to-
$8,000, I'm sorry.
I mean, the planner that set forward was interviewed by the planning commission, and they're opposing a development. So why would I wanna listen to what he has to say when he's gonna oppose what we're thinking?
I'm not in favor of a plan.
I'd like an executive session. For legal purposes.